Okay, hi. I put an agenda document link in the chat, and as of early this morning, we didn't have any agenda items, but let me look. It looks like nobody added any, but if people want to bring up a topic verbally right now, go for it.
Maybe one of the topic from my side is, just to, getting retrospect on the recent KubeCon from other people's perspective who were there. So, and all the topics relating to the edge computing you think were relevant.
So, you and I were both speakers, and I think we even had a couple press interviews. And when you get that busy, you can't go to all the sessions yourself. So understand that my report is pretty much based on having a limited time window to go out there and look at things and do things. Although I did do an analysis trying to prepare a CFP for the next KubeCon Europe. I went and looked at some stats on what was popular. In the IoT Edge space, our own session was lightly attended compared to past ones, but I think it's because we got kind of the worst time slot where they put us in literally the last slot on the last day.
In the farthest room.
Yeah, a lot of people have already left town or burned out by then, I'm afraid. But we still did get, I think it might have been approaching 200 registrations. I think maybe a large part of those never showed, but they at least had the intent at one time.
Yeah, we had probably, I'd say, what would you guys say, about 16 people in that room?
I thought it was about
around 20. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and then it tapered off a little bit as we went on, just because right. It was the very, very end of the day, but yeah. Okay, cool.
And then I know in terms of what I saw based on attendance and talking to other people, Dion, your session had a really high attendance. That was what, the first day?
Yeah, I think it was on Tuesday. Yeah. Right, around lunch, and we had like similar to your session, like near 1,000 of RSPs. I think there was like a couple hundred people in the room. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
And so I think I've heard this before from regular attendees to conferences, that the best sessions are morning of the first day. And then if any vendors give wild parties, you don't want to be the morning of the day after that because the early morning ones are bad, and then the afternoon of the last day is bad. I also heard, but I didn't go there myself, but I heard that the Rancher K3S had a lot of people, although it was in a small room, but I was told that it was really crowded.
Yeah, I talked to Sean about the K3S, but they said they are trying to conquer the problems from different angle. So it's more likely it's now like a cloud connected edge. It's more like a independent edge. So they try to give a light platform to control the application running on the edge without communication. Tight communication with the cloud. So they tend to run it independently. So different, for our project covering this work group, most likely is cloud connected edge. It's more related to CNCF, I think, because I talked to Chris. To my perspective, he's not a fan. Is a fan to working on a lot of edge in CNCF unless it's connected to cloud. That's what my understanding.
Yeah, I think actually this group and my own attitude is that we're actually open to a number of different ways to approach the challenges at edge, and not everything is going to work for everybody. So the K3S falls in the camp of running a full-out Kubernetes cluster at the edge location. That won't work for everyone, but it will clearly work for a number of people. It isn't just Rancher doing it. The session a year before this past one in Seattle had Chick-fil-A running a Kubernetes cluster in the retail location. So
there's also microcates. There's there's a bunch of different ways to, you know, I've got 5 basic patterns to solve it, kind of in my head. And I agree. There's not one solution to this thing. There's 4 or 5 different architectural patterns. I think we need to document those and then, you know, put together requirements. Somebody had mentioned that, you know, we talked about the auto registration stuff.
You know what? Before you go on, James, I'm wondering, some of us are new to others. Maybe we should have started with some brief intros rather than having popping in and everybody talking. Because there's even some handles I see in the participants I don't recognize myself. So why don't you start, James? And because I think it's been a while since you joined us on one of these meetings. Just spend one or two sentences on.
Yeah, James Kirkland. I'm a staff cloud native architect at VMware and was at Red Hat before that for 11 years. I've done a ton of work. I was chief architect for IoT at Red Hat and have done a bunch of implementations with different customers.
Okay, let me go on down the list as I see it in participants. The handle F70.
Yes, hi, this is Francisco. I'm currently working as a solution architect for a small company based here in Argentina. Had some projects on my own outside the company, deploying Kubernetes on the edge, mostly based on Raspberry Pis with K3s. For the time being, we tried other solutions, other approaches like MicroK8s from Canonical. Didn't support ARM-based architecture by the time we tried, so we're sticking with this one. And I somehow find out about you guys, so I decided to pop in, see what's going on.
Are you willing to discuss what your application is, or is it still like a stealth mode startup where you can't talk about it?
No, it's a startup. But also we put together like a framework in order to deploy this. We with some colleague of work here, we created an organization in GitLab called IoT Ops. Pretty much everything we deployed is there, and we focus mostly trying to develop this and to share with some folks. For the time being, we created the Kubernetes with some applications like Home Assistant in order to deploy at our houses and mainly control our home automation stuff. But the idea is not for that only, but is to serve as a framework for what we are doing on outside our work. That is
okay. So this was it called IoT Ops or
yes,
apps?
Yes, it's GitLab. No, it's OPS.
Okay, and is that open source?
Yes. That's mainly the idea.
Yeah, I'd like to take a look at it if you can post a link in the chat or in the agenda doc.
Sure.
It sounds interesting. Sure. So is the idea that you're managing infrastructure as code there, where you're actually managing the Raspberry Pis and the cluster installation through Git, or is Git?
Yes. Well, the idea for the time being, since this is a very small project, is we have an Ansible playbook that provision mainly K3s on the Raspberry Pi, and from there on we handle with Kubernetes. We haven't yet figured out how we will actually work with multiple edge locations. Right now we're using, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Zero Tier. We're using Zero Tier as a VPN, so that makes a kind of a flat VPN, if you will. Mm-hmm. So we're able to access all the nodes easily. I don't know if that's the approach that we will use for the whole project, or that's what we're leveraging on at the moment.
Yeah, if you'd be interested, I think we'll move on in the interest of giving everybody a chance to introduce them.
Definitely.
At a future talk, if you wouldn't mind giving a presentation of say 20, 25 minutes on what your project looks like and maybe a picture or two, that'd be great. You can just look at our public agenda document and put yourself in at some future date that you'd like. But this sounds really interesting, and I think there's potentially a lot of other people who are interested in maybe the problem you're trying to solve or one very much like it. Thanks. Let's move on. Frederick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, but I've been a fixture on these calls. Anyway,
Okay.
so I'm with the Eclipse Foundation. I'm the program manager at the Foundation for IoT and Edge Computing. And
Okay.
essentially, I'm working with people like Kilton, for example, on their Edge projects. So right now, we have 2 projects at the Eclipse Foundation that are specifically targeted at Edge. One is obviously Eclipse IO Fog, and the other one is Fog 05 by AD-Link. And essentially, why not give you a scoop? So next week, we are announcing the creation. We are essentially starting an edge computing working group at the Eclipse Foundation to, let's say, foster the adoption of both IOFog, Fog 05, and other projects that will be joining. And essentially, this should be a fun thing. So more than happy to maybe at the next edition of this meeting to share more information about this brand new initiative. But obviously, we are still committed to working with the CNCF in the context of this working group as well, because we see it as completely complementary to our own little working group.
Okay, great. I think everybody probably knows you, Kilton, but maybe a sentence or two wouldn't hurt.
Sure, no problem. So hi, Kilton Hopkins, co-founder of a company called EdgeWorks, and the creator of a project called Eclipse IO Fog, and which is now going on its 6th year of development, although the last 3 have really been the good solid uptake years. Co-heading up this new Eclipse Edge Native Working Group that's about to be announced next week. My purview is to make sure that we figure out the right architectures here in this working group, and then find ways to continue to implement the latest and greatest ideas and requirements from people in the open source code base of IOFog. So you'll hear me talk about IOFog a lot. Most of the time it's in context of what we're looking to do or how it's being leveraged. And but that doesn't mean that I only want to talk about IOFog. Please tell me what you're doing and what you'd like to see, because that's all really important research for me.
I'll give you one that this came up in the demo that we gave at KubeCon just, what was it, 10 days-ish ago. But we gave a demo that wasn't Kubernetes centric, but perhaps in an upcoming meeting, you could actually go through the mechanics of setting one up, maybe not production grade, but just for people who'd want to do a quick eval.
Yeah.
Play around with it in a home lab, but centered on using it with Kubernetes.
Yeah, would love to. And yes, and that was actually a good shout out from the audience there during that demo, was that, hey, like, we want to see you actually using Kubernetes to drive this, not just its own APIs. And so that would be a great demonstration, would be more than happy to do it.
Yeah, I know you on stage, you had, what was it, a Pi or something. So I know personally I've got a little home lab. So if you could make this so that we could try to do it again ourselves at home, that'd be something I'd like to see.
That's a great idea. And so I'll pass the baton to the next person now, but just final comment. I think to do that presentation, we could make that session of this working group one that is more interactive, where people are able to do the work alongside. That's a great idea for like a turn of the year topic.
Yeah, like, you mean like an online workshop where everybody has one sitting at their desktop as they join the Zoom?
We'll just do it in this meeting, and there'll be a follow along at home.
What would be really cool is if we could get them to talk to each other at the end. Well,
so after Red Hat's Project Scupper is fully integrated with Eclipse IO Fog, you will be able to do that, Steve. It is going to be a very cool demonstration.
Okay, yeah, Okay,
And you can
You're
do it
obligated.
today with IOFOG, but it's a little ugly because you can only get certain microservices to talk to each other. So we're going to let's collaborate on this workshop. This is great.
Should we look to do like quarterly, maybe a half-day hackathon or something where we get together and everybody's online together and we just work together on whatever, either requirements writing or, working on proof of concept or whatever.
I
attract as many people as possible.
I love that idea. I'll hang on Zoom and collaborate with anyone who's available. And once a quarter sounds like probably as much as I could handle, but I love that idea.
Yeah.
Hey, Kilton, I remember usually you have the meetup in San Francisco, or I can host one in Seattle. I mean, that would be more productive if we sit together half day. It's much.
Yeah, we could, for everybody.
At least for the US people, that's.
Yeah, for the people that could get together, we could fly
out or something, but I think for together, half day is probably more productive than 3-day video chatting.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
We could have
especially when you're coding or try something.
Yeah, well, we could have people join remotely if they have to, and for everyone else, then we could have a get together that is normally we only get together face to face at KubeCon. There's no reason we couldn't have moving get-togethers, especially Bay Area where there's a concentration of people. That's a very good idea. Yeah,
or we could do it at traveling with KubeCons. Although I realize that many of us don't go to all of them, but that's another venue. We did have our small face-to-face lunch in San Diego that I thought went well.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the intros again. So, Moritz, you're another regular, but maybe a sentence or two just for the benefit of newcomers. And you're muted.
Did you refer to me? Sorry.
Oh, well, you can go. I was going to skip you and I, but I guess just
yeah. Sorry, I don't know. Yeah.
Go ahead. So
let's skip. Yeah, Ian, go ahead.
Moritz was the one, but maybe sometimes you join these Zooms and then have an email or something come in and you get distracted. So we'll assume that that's what's going on here.
Hey, me?
Yes.
My name is Inding. I work on the Edge about 2 years now. So especially when I started the Kubernetes Edge about early 2017. However, because I have a couple of people left, so I will come back and rejoin the group and participate more. Hopefully we can have something to share before the next KubeCon Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm working on mainly Kubernetes and also work with the Eclipse, group to see what we can collaborate together.
Okay, so the intros are done, but if you want, James, I think you were talking about, what did you say, like 4, 5 different patterns that you've seen of applying Kubernetes?
Yeah, just with Kubernetes or not. So I've seen, hold on a sec, let me pull up something.
And this smells like a paper, James, that could come out of this group is the different architectural approaches to the Kubernetes.
Yeah. So, okay, let me share this out. I always have trouble finding the stupid button. Record, share. Oh, it says screen sharing is disabled, Steve.
Okay, let me figure out what I have to do to enable you.
I don't have my glasses on and all these buttons. There are too many buttons.
Okay, try it again. I just made you a co-host.
Yep, I got it. Okay. Outlook. Okay, screw it. I'll just share my desktop.
Yeah, part of the community standards are that you have to start these meetings with everybody restricted because they've had some unfortunate incidents of trolls joining the Zoom meetings and throwing things up.
Really? You know, it's so much easier to just cooperate and not do this junk, but
Okay, we can
Okay.
see your desktop.
okay, cool. So I've seen people using virtual kubelets, a la what Kilton is doing with IOFOG. We've seen single binary microcates with the Ubuntu micro implementation, and with K3S, and to some extent with Minikube and Kind as well, and things like that. I've seen small Kubernetes installs where, you know, it's a minimal install. It's not very high availability. It may be a couple of nodes. It may be 3 nodes, things like that. Then the IOFOG is more K3S, or not K3S, excuse me, more like the CRD based agents in the cloud and on the edge, versus the virtual kubelet with the agent and the agent in the cloud portion of it. So I've seen both.
Yeah, I think the CRD approach is the more recent version of Azure
Yeah,
IoT.
yeah, and Kilton and I were talking about that at KubeCon, that you know he's open to enabling that CRD based on IOFOG as to match sort of what KubeEdge has done, and he's also done some stuff and demonstrated integrating Octant, and you know, through APIs you could integrate anything, but Octant was a good one. So
I think your second and third bullets of the single binary or the so-called small,
yeah,
the difference between the full is in many cases people have gone at what's in the default upstream Kubernetes
yeah,
and pulled out things like cloud providers, storage
Right.
plugins, etc., to get it.
yeah. So it's you know, it may not be one process, it may be multiple process, but I mean, if you go and look at K3S, you can see what they do to strip stuff out. You know, the question is, I mean, there's a million ways to solve this, and there's pros and cons with everything.
Yeah.
And I talk about it here in this presentation. You know, I won't go. Maybe we can schedule time to go through the whole thing, but I think we need to provide architectural patterns that the projects can then, you know, either decide to adhere to or not. But we also need to look at the services, and we've talked about this, the services on the other side that'll enable auto configuration. You know, you can do it in something like MicroK8s or K3S because everything is pretty much prescribed, and you have to configure it to do anything else. It is configurable, but it's very closed in what it can do.
Yeah. There's kind of 2 levels of configuration going on, right?
Right.
The first level is configuring what you've got out at the edge location
Yep.
as a single instance.
Yep.
But if you look ahead 2 or 3 moves on the chessboard, your real problem isn't that. Just like configuring an individual Docker container wasn't enough and you needed an orchestrator. In a way, this is the same sort of thing where you need kind of, if you have a full Kubernetes at every edge, you, I think, come to the conclusion that you need an orchestrator.
Yeah, and so I've been working on, and I should be able to share it as a doc to the group in the next week or 2.
Yeah, this would seem like a good working document
Yeah.
turned into a white paper, and then maybe something even in table form of calling out kind of, oh, okay, I see you've got it, like existing things and
Yeah.
which of those categories they fall in, and kind of what
this,
what decisions and related to what trade-offs they made. Yeah.
right. And then I've got usage patterns and things like that as well. But you know, the core of it is how do you, and I submitted this, I'm going to submit this as a talk with Dion and I, how do you select the right deployment pattern for what you're trying to accomplish? You know, what do you need for HA? What are your regulatory requirements? What's the data velocity?
Looks like a great talk. What are you submitting it to? KubeCon or somewhere else?
KubeCon in Europe, yeah, for March.
Okay. Well, pencil me in. I'll be there.
Okay, cool. And if you want, I'll show you. I'll send the abstract out, and you guys can look at it.
Yeah.
It's pretty much straightforward. It'll be.
I'd be happy to review it because I assume you didn't put it in yet. So if you want,
I haven't. No. Yeah.
Just to proofread it, get it to me today, and I'll
write it today. Dion and I went through it. So yeah, if you can proofread it, that would be great. I'll share it, and then I'll submit it today. But you know, I think we need to have an opinion, just like we did with the security. We need to have an opinion on this stuff, and have recommended practices and architectures. And people, you know, begin to use other deployment mechanisms and patterns, then we can capture those as well as time goes on. But
yeah, well, having lived through kind of the CNCF storage SIG and the Kubernetes storage SIG, I'm somewhat reluctant to go for opinions if it amounts to king making, because I think that I think we can maybe narrow it down, but I think the primary value we can deliver is just to lay out individual facts as opposed to opinions, and let the audience make their own.
I agree. The best thing is to educate, right?
Yeah.
And give them all the information they need, and then they can select the deployment pattern and the projects and software. Because my implementation is going to be different than everybody else's, and it's going to have its own requirements, and they're going to have to pick based on that. And the projects are going to have to decide what use cases that they want to meet and not meet, and what their priorities are.
Yeah, I'm going to think this is going to fall out just like container orchestration did, where if you go back 3 years, you still had Docker Swarm, Mesos, Kubernetes, and eventually, if you get large numbers of people going down one path, it ends up getting paved to where it becomes more attractive than the dirt footpath, even if the other one in theory was better suited for your use case. There's value in and safety with numbers.
I certainly don't have a dog in the fight to some extent, as long as my dog is that it's Kubernetes, either Kubernetes or Kubernetes adjacent, and you know, integratable and compliant. So you know, I think everybody would agree that, you know, that's what we want, and that's kind of our market. And then beyond that, it's just like you said, laying out the facts only, no opinions, and then, you know, that way people can make educated choices. The other thing is, I think we need to as a separate, and I won't have time to submit this, but you know, maybe this could be adjacent or whatever, or maybe it's something we do at KubeCon Europe as a workshop or a hack day, beginning to talk about the bootstrapping and provisioning stuff that we talked about. That, you know, I think we need to get in a room and capture all the requirements from that we know of, and maybe find some implementers that also can help us with that stuff.
Yeah.
Steve, I'd heard, and I think it was you, but it may have been someone else, that we talked about a config registry for the devices once they've authenticated and attested and all that stuff. Was it you or Kelton or somebody?
I think we talked on this working group. I think we were all basically chipping in. That's, I think, when we talked about
somebody was saying it was one of the other working groups that was already working on a service, and I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, I don't think that was me.
Okay.
I think one thing I'd add.
If you mean about device registry, that's something that's covered by Eclipse Hono, but I'm not sure if you think.
Yeah, no, yeah. So this it wasn't edge oriented, but it was just, you know, some service where it captured a configuration and held it.
Oh, I think that's something we'd like to know and bring into the
Yeah.
group. Yeah.
So, some of it we could use Valero to potentially capture or whatever, but or at least leverage that as a storage point for all the YAML.
Yeah. Well, I think one other perspective is I think I'll agree with these 5 categories. I think in some cases I've seen these things, some of them coalesced, like your single binary and small K8s.
Yep.
The fact is they're both small, so you could call it 4 categories instead of 5. But I don't know of anything you left out that I've come across.
Cool.
But another perspective is that really Kubernetes itself, the existing control plane, even if enhanced with CRDs, doesn't address the network interconnects.
No.
And even Kubernetes itself kind of has Istio being one of the popular selections for an overlay for managing the interconnects between the apps and services. And I think there's a call for that in the Edge IoT space as well.
Yeah, I think we need to address CNI and CNS because they're both going to be important as part of the configuration. Because if you've got a lot of analytic data being coalesced, you may have shared storage, but it may be using Ceph as a shared file system for the disks in there, or a JBOD, or it's going to be a wide variety of stuff. So I think if we can the other thing we haven't really gotten to is capturing the CNI patterns and the CSI patterns and all that sort of stuff. I think those are things that we need to document as well. I agree, because what people use, whether they need load balancing or they just need standard networking with some simple ingress, it's going to depend on the use case.
Yeah, I think actually if service mesh makes sense in the traditional public cloud Kubernetes, it makes even more sense. I'm not saying a specific instance of a service mesh like Istio, because they were targeted at IT apps using HTTPS, and they're not necessarily appropriate for edge workloads. But that concept of reducing your operational costs to manage this and relieving application developers of the burden of handling security and networking, that is really compelling at Edge. I mean, Metcalfe's law said this goes up with N squared, and the N is much bigger with Edge.
Yeah, and somebody asked me the other day, because I'd gone through the presentation, they go, why the hell would somebody want to run Kubernetes on the edge? And I was like, well, these edge use cases are where the OT operating technology and the IT come together, and IT application developers do not want to write to hardware and no networking and all that stuff. You've got to provide a secure IT environment. And if they're already using Kubernetes and they know how to code against all that and operate and build Helm charts and write all the YAML and everything and get everything right from an operational and an app, the app developers are going to be much more comfortable writing these apps and deploying them out and providing standard edge services that are available too. So he asked me the question and I was like, well, people are doing it. And I had to step back and think, well, why are they doing it?
Well, I think I've had that same question, but as you give them a rhetorical question, well, are they running containerized software at Edge?
Right.
And is there a lot of it? Well, guess what was engineered to manage running a lot of containerized software? And I think then they have the aha. But I think the thing that maybe is even a more interesting opportunity that people don't recognize is that with CRDs, potentially the Kubernetes control plane could manage things that aren't even containerized apps, but they're similar. Really, Kubernetes isn't looking into what's in the container image. It just moves it around. So call it a blob. Well, there are things like firmware for, I don't know, you can even go down to sub-Linux things like Arduinos that still need software delivery.
Yeah, you got to distribute it, and you could distribute it in some form down and have it there and available and staged. I've seen that with radio firmware updates over AMQP. We staged locally staged in a particular SFTP directory and then the radios just reach out to a known IP and FTP into it and pull down their updates. So I agree. It's not the stuff beneath us. We may be staging data or pulling, you know, the southbound command and control stuff is also going to have to go through this plane.
Mm-hmm.
This is a wonderful pattern, by the way, which is that if we're really going to orchestrate full systems, we need to stop thinking that a container is equivalent to a piece of application functionality and ask how it should be implemented. Maybe it's a serverless function, maybe it's a VM, but the whole world should be orchestratable by Kubernetes, and that
it's a workflow.
Physical world. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a workflow. It's not just hitting the App Store button.
Yep, that's it. There's no, exactly. There's no universal app store for every car and every factory shop floor. Exactly.
And I think there's very similar things too. I mean, the reality is that Kubernetes doesn't go drill down and analyze what's in this thing that happens to be called the container image. So it really is just moving around blobs, but
that's right.
You do have some of these common problems. Now, some of them are challenges, you know, like I think it's lunacy to expect your edge locations to be pulling things off a public cloud source like Docker Hub directly, that you need some sort of CDN-like or caching mechanism so that they can even recover or operate air-gapped. But once again, it isn't just container images that you want to have this delivery mechanism for. And we're early stages. There's an awful lot of problems that I think could support full-blown startups just for a little niche of the problems that are occurring out at Edge. And I don't know,
I think that's right, and I think there's topics that have not even surfaced here yet, such as what you're going to do for redundant storage at the edge and things like that. Now, I'll chime in with one little thing, which is that we were talking about, you know, recapping what happened at KubeCon. I had a nice talk with M2, Michael from the Harbor project, and he said that, and everyone's welcome to participate in helping them build this out, but he said that they are adding in the capability to do a single grab of a new image, verify it, and then distribute BitTorrent style from edge node to edge node. I'm super interested in this, and I think it might be time to have, you know, some more Harbor talk in here. I know we had a great demonstration a few months back, but that was really exciting to me because that's exactly what you were saying, Steve.
Yeah, and already Harbor has gone beyond container image too, because it is also a Helm registry. So, you know, a Helm chart isn't a container image, yet they managed to extend Harbor to make it a catalog of both Helm charts and container images. And I've talked to them in the past. I don't know that it's on the current roadmap for kind of next release or anything, but I think that Harbor project is aware that there's an interest in potentially using it to distribute things like firmware images. And that could, you combine that with the BitTorrent, that could be just a killer building block for a lot of these edge deployments.
Key piece. It's a key missing piece.
Now, the one thing I think could use some work in Harbor is the back-end storage for where those blobs reside.
Yeah.
I think it's S3 or a Postgres database, but I think there might be some real benefit to using a content addressable store that does dedo, because at these edge locations, you do have finite resources, and there's the potential issue of, if you just use random storage, like say, use a relational database for that backend store and keep multiple versions, I could envision that thing becoming sort of a storage pig. Now, storage is getting a lot cheaper, so that may be a problem and maybe not, but it ought to be considered.
Well, it's there's the bigger problem of if you're talking about any edge location too. Yeah, storage is cheap enough that maybe you can throw a lot at it, but you can't go service it as easily as a data center. So you really want to avoid running out of storage just because of day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
That's an expensive call.
And you've also got to be cognizant of drive life for mechanical drives. But you've also, if it's compact flash or if it's SSD or whatever, you know, at least on the stuff I've done, if you're deploying a 10-year solution, you've got to buy something that's going to have the right wear patterns and
Yeah.
algorithms within the drives to make sure that you don't end up killing them.
Yeah, there's
Pushing
real
them into the data
advantages to
environment.
keeping it small. I mean, you get lightning strikes, people stealing a piece of equipment that you have to, repopulate.
Yep.
And if you used a content addressable store with dedupe, that kind of cloning, repopulation, rehydrating should be a lot easier. And
Yeah.
probably the technology that does dedupe could be relied upon for your replication. You know, Harbor also has north, south, and east, west replication available.
Mm-hmm.
But you would like to not send full, full uncompressed content over those pipes, because those pipes are going to be really finite at edge.
Yeah, and we need, and that's why I'd recommend a messaging-based architecture, because like with AMQP, you can put priorities on these things, and you can use priority queues so that you have the ability to take important data first and control what's going over that line, over the wire, back and forth, north and south, because otherwise you've got to do it at a network layer, and it's much harder, because it's going to be, you're either going to be doing packet inspection, or you're going to be trying to tag priority on different types of traffic, because the traffic's based on the content, and it's not readily apparent to the networking layer what the priority is on this stuff.
So I think that that surfaces now another pattern, and I think, I mean, we're really flying today in terms of defining, like, you know, these are like 3-4 new papers probably need to come out of today's starting talks. But James, I think you've nailed something here, which is that the pattern that we're looking for is, we don't want to force people to implement a network layer underneath on their own to solve the problem. If we already know ahead of time that there's a better way to manage the traffic, then it should just be something that comes as a package deal and rides over whatever connectivity you got. This avoids the problem of saying my implementation can't do what this other one can because I didn't set up the network right. That shouldn't be happening.
And another dimension to that problem is the integrity of whatever you will deploy on the nodes. The fact that you need digital signatures and the capacity to validate them, because the last thing you want is somebody to intercept whatever you are deploying and replace it with a nefarious version. And that's really, really, really important. And certainly +1 on a previous comment on the fact that you need a messaging platform or a messaging pattern underneath all of that. Before joining the foundation, I was at Pivotal working on Cloud Foundry, and specifically Cloud Foundry Bosch. One of the things we were doing well in that platform was the fact that it was all based on some messaging capabilities underneath. And I wouldn't say that Bosch is a model for everything. But one thing it was doing well was the fact that, yes, the deployment was always running on an asynchronous protocol under the hood, and that's really, really important.
Hey guys, we're currently using MQTT in our project, but at the KubeCon, these guys presented this NATS.io. NATS.io. I don't know if any of you had experience.
Yeah, that was in one of the keynotes, I think, but I don't think in the IoT Edge we talked about NATS at all. But
and in fact, funnily enough, when I referred to a messaging capability in Cloud Foundry Bosch, it was based on the top of NATS. So.
Very interesting. Francisco, I think your connection is not quite as good. So I want to make sure I give you space to keep speaking with whatever you were saying. You seem a bit frozen at the moment with your connection, but the only issue that I have with NATS at being used for edge stuff is that it requires that you have an instance hung high, right, somewhere up in the cloud in order to be the messaging bounce point, which is exactly what we're trying to kind of move past with IOFOG. And that was our first implementation. Works well, but you really want to be able to do direct peer-to-peer communication if possible. And so Nats is fantastic. I love that project. But I think that's something to consider is for completely isolated locations, you still want to be able to communicate.
Yes, and that's especially important considering, well, how frequent our air-gapped environments are. Certainly, you don't want to have to pull from the public internet whatever you are deploying all the time. And if it's not baked in whatever deployment solution you have, then you run into problems, especially considering I worked a few years at NATO, and we had completely distinct networks, completely physically separated for all the secret and higher stuff. So that's an important thing to take into account. Otherwise, you will run into issues trying to drive adoption in those kinds of environments.
That makes a lot of sense.
So I've just been trying to capture some of the discussion points as we add to this.
And maybe I see you're putting them in your deck, but if you can go back and put them in the notes document for this.
Yeah, I will. I'll copy all this stuff over. We also, do we have a template that we want to use, or we can just create a blank presentation so that I get it off because this was a presentation I put together internally initially.
I think the thing to do is to create a Google Doc or want to make it a deck, you could do Google Slides.
No, well, I think it'll work better as a doc. We'll work in the doc, and then we can summarize it in a deck afterwards.
And then there's actually an email alias for this whole group.
Oh,
so just give write permission to the group, and that actually is by Kubernetes community standards how you're supposed to operate. And you're not supposed to make it generally publicly editable because we've had trolls go in. Graffiti documents.
And that's the email alias that the invites and everything come from.
Right, exactly.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll put it in the notes, and then I'll publish I'll put it in a doc and publish the doc out with comment only. And then if somebody needs write, they can write.
Yeah, in general, I think that if you restrict it to our group, we haven't had problems in a Google Doc. If somebody flat fingers something by mistake and deletes a whole chunk, you can get it back because
it has a version control. So okay, cool. And I'll pop all the sort of an outline of everything in there just as a placeholder, and then people can mess with it.
Okay, sounds great. So it looks like even though we started with no agenda, this has been a nice topic that is unpeeled an onion where we discover a lot of things too going forward for the next year. For January, I did stop at the Ubuntu booth and got a demo of their lightweight Kubernetes for Edge. And we talked to them, and they were going to put themselves on the agenda for one of the January meetings to give say a 30-minute demo of the Ubuntu Edge solution. So I'm looking forward to that. We've still got 8 minutes left if anybody else wants to put anything else on the table for discussion.
Steve, I remember during the talk in KubeCon, you mentioned the white paper. Because I haven't attended the meeting for a couple of months, I don't know what the status or
So there is a security white paper.
I know the security, but do we have a general Kubernetes?
I think that's what we're working towards now.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's just say we aspire to having that second white paper, but based on what we went through for the security one, I think that took well over 6 months, right? Yeah. Kilton, I think you were maybe an initial driving force. How long did we spend from the time it first was discussed to when we declared it published?
So the fun history of that paper is the first draft I wrote in 6 hours in a tea-fueled evening. Then followed by, it was about 6 months of edit and then and integration of comments, and then finally publish, although maybe it was a bit under 6 months. I'm saying this because I think the first drafts of things can generally come out pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And then we can have a working document that has maybe even 80% plus of the final content. It just needs to be refigured and refined. And so the expectation—
And James, you might want to stop sharing your desktop.
Okay, sorry. I forgot I was sharing.
Although we're learning a lot about you, James.
I'm an open book. It really doesn't matter to me.
That's great.
What you see is what you get, unfortunately. My wife's had to put up with it for 30 years.
That's great. So I think we can get first drafts out pretty quick that have a lot of content, and then setting a deadline, seemed to help us get a bunch of revisions in. And we tried once to set the deadline for, I think, one event, and didn't quite make it. And then we said that we would then get the paper ready for, another upcoming event, and that worked, and we got it out in time. And so then after we got it ready, it took another month to get it through the CNCF process of getting it published out. So it seems like maybe it was more like 4 or 5 months, but it's getting close to that 6 month time frame.
Well, KubeCon Europe is probably too early. Maybe we could shoot for KubeCon China.
Yeah, we can do that also. What I noticed is we were really concerned with getting all of our, all of the fine points revised and ducks in a row. But it turns out maybe the better thing to do is to publish 80% accurate or 80% complete living documents in order to move faster. Because after publishing it, then we had a whole lot more people looking at it and learning. So maybe we want to do that now.
Yeah, I think as long as you label it a draft, I have no problem with putting it out on the GitHub repository early.
Yeah, I think we'd garner a lot more inputs from the greater, community. And once it's already out there and accessible to people outside of kind of these working group sessions, that's just a thought.
Yeah, the one issue I found in the past, because I've worked on kind of not necessarily white papers, but actually designs like CAPS. And there's some advantage to leaving it in the Google Doc form as opposed to GitHub, because I think the commenting and proposed edits, I personally like working with a Google Doc far better than having people log issues and submit PRs against a markdown document.
No, the security one was also done as a Google Doc, and then once it was finished, I converted it to the markdown and
yeah, I think once you have it published, then you put it in markdown and let the public have at it.
But yeah, we don't really have a way to publish, in our working group repo, anything other than markdown.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the right thing for things that are finalized. And then the question is, how do we kind of dive in and move faster?
Yeah.
For collaborating.
And even after that, I find that the original white paper that formed this group and, just defining terms and everything, it still lives on, and there's the people coming up, putting comments there and getting things from it. So, yeah, but definitely, I think at some point here, marking it as a, at least putting it, a version on it and publishing it is a good thing to do. But, writing it in Google Doc is much, much faster. Yeah.
So we've got 3 minutes. Before the end of this month, we've got the APAC meeting that, at least in North America, is going to fall into what for many is a holiday season. So I'm not sure whether I'll make it or not, but I guess we're still going to have it. Is that right? Because I get asked by people.
When is it?
So it could be 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I'll be there for sure.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'll host it. So whoever.
I'll aspire to joining, but where the time falls in my time zone, sometimes I put it on my calendar and then get up in other things when the time comes around.
Yeah.
For you, James, I think that's going to fall about midnight or 1 a.m. your time.
Yeah, I won't make it.
Yeah, for the East Coast, it's really unfortunate timing. Yeah.
Okay, anybody got anything they want to talk about in the last minute we have remaining, or otherwise I'll close this one out.
I really enjoyed all the talks, that the different Edge IoT talks that were out there. I think they were all interesting, and it feels like there's a community coalescing. Do we have anybody from Rancher or Canonical that is part of the SIG?
Canonical wasn't aware that this was going on, but I think they're going to be joining because they said they were going to present. Rancher has, I think, tentatively said that they would present K3S a few times, but has not materialized so far. When we actually presented on K3S at KubeCon China, but the Rancher people weren't involved. I did the deck, but I did clear it and have them review it first. But no, they have not been active in this group. It could just be that they're a small company and can't do everything, but we can reach out again and ask them, but I've been doing that, so.
Cool. Well, if
I can talk to Sean to see what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a personal relation with their CEO. So
yeah, I'd love to have their participation and their point of view represented in all this, because they certainly are relevant.
Yeah, if we're going to do that, document, and then, kind of their K3S niche is one of the 5 categories. Right. It seems like we'd at least like to have them review it.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to end the recording, and thanks everybody. It's been another great meeting.
Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Likewise. See y'all later.